about change in that sense. And if you link change to evolution and sustainability, and I will give you a historical background as Mr. Adi Godrej gave a contemporary and futuristic background. I will relate myself to history a while as to what this means. You know, in the Western philosophy, the whole world is moving towards a deterministic course and to a climactic final act, which could be Armageddon or whatever, but the world is only moving forward. And it has been scientifically also tried to be attempted to be explained by Darwin. It is only movement forward, and there is nothing like a man checking back or the whole civilization standing for a while to think, to introspect, whether to go this way or that way. This kind of a different approach is not internalized in the Western civilization. Now, I have a few questions in mind. I thought I would share it with you. The change that we are talking about, is it change with continuity or without continuity? Karl Marx said it has to be changed without continuity. That change is revolution. If you have revolution, is it sustainable? Or is it an evolution? Evolution always presupposes that you proceed from stage A to stage B. And in terms, actually Karl Marx wrote a couple of articles about India, even before he wrote the Das Kapital, in the year 1853, in New York Herald Tribune. It's a brilliant exposition for a man who has never visited India, who had only perceived India through the kind of information which must have passed so slowly and so with so much of editing. And he said, India is one of the countries which has achieved a tremendous amount of civilizational enlightenment, economic prosperity. And it has conceived of an economy which he later on defined as Asiatic model of production, where he said it's a small republic where the distance between consumer and producer is so little. And it had achieved what he had later said as the primitive socialism. It had achieved a socialistic model of very high level of equality, which no other civilization could achieve. But he said the problem with India is, for 2000 years it has not changed at all. And without change, a society can never come up. And if India has to change, India has to be prepared for a revolution. And India can never revolt so long as its socio-economic model is as it is, and so the British is doing a very creative destruction in this country, and so India is being prepared by the colonial rule. Otherwise, anti-colonialist Marx said the colonial destruction work in India is a preparation of India for a revolution. But India never revolted. You must understand the history of a nation in which you are living, which you are never allowed to learn in any educational institution in this country. History, as Churchill said, Mr. Godrej quoted Churchill. He said, history is written by the victors. A victorious civilization of the last 200 years, victorious countries, victorious politicians, victorious dictators, so to say, because before 200 years, 150 years, there was nothing called democracy. They wrote the history and we read them, and we read them, quote them religiously and understand ourselves through the history which they have written. And Mr. Godrej spoke about the Hindu rate of growth. You know, this term has settled in our academic discourse. But it happened in sometime in 1970, when Japan rose as a very powerful economy. It rang the bell somewhere in Europe as to how Japan is rising. Because after all, economic development is the prerogative of the Western civilization. How can Japan rise? Is it an accident? But one thing which you must give due credit to the West is, they will always take note of any risky development elsewhere. So what happened? One Paul Bairoch, he is one of the well-known economic historians. He studied economic history in Paris and Brussels. In 1970, he began to do research as to how Asia, which is written off as a third world structure, how Japan is rising in this. And he came out with astounding findings, not only about Japan, about the entire third world and about Europe itself. And he said, he studied the economic history of the world and came to the conclusion that in 1750, India's share of world GDP was 24.5% and China 32.8%, and the third world share was 73%, and you will be stunned to know that that of Europe was just 7% in 1750. This shook the Western establishment to think that we all thought economic development, prosperity, standard of living is our forte. And now a huge question has been raised that it is a case of rags to riches for us. And we were always a poor third world nation, even in 1600 and 1500. The question which Paul Bairoch raised, Ferdinand Brendel and Lobier and later Bairoch said that the thought that the West was always rich was wrong, that the West was a poor, and as compared to the rest of the world, we didn't have that kind of high standard of living. This shook the Western thinking. Then Angus Maddison, who led the greatest research in this field, instituted by the OECD Development Studies Center, he came out with his results between 2001 and 2007, and he passed away in the first half of 2010, just now in May or June. And he came to the conclusion by writing his final book, OECD India Development Studies Center, The World Economy, Millennial Perspective. He gave a 2000-year perspective of the world, in which he said, the share of India in world GDP in the first year of the millennium, 2000 years back, was 32%. That of China, 28%. And the whole of Asia, 73%. And in 1500 years later, India 24%, China 25%, Asia 65%. And in 1700, India 25%, China 22%. In 1820, India 16%, when Britain was 8%. And Madison raised this issue after Bairoch research. If Bairoch were true, the Western rise is not an issue of science and technology. It is an issue of robbing and colonizing and destroying the third world. And that is what Angus Maddison research finally established. This is not what is taught in any of the educational institutions today in India, because it will promote the confidence of India about itself. And we were in line with the thinking of Max Weber, who in the year 1920 wrote a book, Sociology of Economics, in which he said that in modern economic development of the capitalist model in which the market plays the principal role, only the Protestant Christian model can make the society compliant with the current needs, and two societies can never develop in this, and that is the Hindu and Buddhist societies. These people are condemned to remain undeveloped. 1920, you know, Max Weber is supposed to have had the greatest influence on the social economic thinkers and policy makers in India in the last 100 years. So the subject that was taught to us was that we were a failed civilization. That this civilization can never grow. You have to discard your history, you have to discard your culture, you have to discard your sociology, you have to discard your belief systems. Then only you qualify for development. This was the thought which dominated the modern Indian intellectualism. This is completely blasted by the Angus Madison research. And Kendra, when this thought of Hindu rate of growth came, there was no Angus Madison study. That India was the leading economic engine of the world was not known to the Indians. It is the socialist rate of growth which was tagged on to the Hindus. What did they do? They led the world for 1700 years. And it is not Gurumurthy who is saying it. William Dalrymple, when he wrote an article on the 60th anniversary of India's independence, he said it is the empire which is striking back. It is not a poor nation attempting to become a rich nation. It's not a weak civilization which is trying to become a superior civilization. India occupied the highest place in history, and he quoted Angus Madison for the first time. It is not just Angus Madison. It is not an isolated research. It is a research which had been going on for the last 30 years, started by Paul Bairoch, and it has been continuously being renewed, and ultimately OECD owned it up as the final, determinative, legitimate economic history of the world. So William Dalrymple said, India is striking back to regain its position. First, we must change our ideas about India. We must change the ideas about ourselves. Anyone who stands on the podium and talks in English today blames India, derides India, demeans India.